It is pretty humid here. I just checked half an hour ago. It was 70% humidity here in Salem, which is very unusual for this time of day. We often have that in the morning. Welcome, everyone. Hello, and welcome to our Revolution Oregon statewide call. We're happy to have you join us tonight. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from in the chat, or where you're from. You could be calling from anywhere, but where you usually are from would be great. Just lost my screen there. I've got a new phone and that's what I'm on. So it's, of course, little hiccups in the plan here. Micah, welcome from Eugene, the Community Alliance of Lane County. Fantastic to have you here with us. I don't know if you heard already, my name's Jennifer Sprague. I'm in Salem. I'm a leader with the Our Revolution Central Willamette. I hope you can see me. So tonight's call is about education in Oregon, and we've got some fantastic school board members joining us from throughout Oregon. And it's going to be a great call, and I'm glad that the weather's cooler. We were talking about having some tough few days of extremely hot weather here in the Pacific Northwest, and I know I've got family on the east side of the mountains that are still experiencing some hot weather. Thankfully, we've cooled off a bit. Hello, Mary. Good to see you or hear from you in the chat. Welcome, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the Our Revolution Oregon statewide call. We're happy to have you join us tonight. My name is Jennifer Sprague. I am in Salem. I'm a leader with Our Revolution Central Willamette. Please tell us your name and where you're from in the chat so we can welcome you. Tonight's call, we've got several school board members from throughout Oregon joining us, and we're going to be talking about education and equity in education in Oregon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Revolution Oregon statewide call. We're happy to have you join us tonight, and we hope that you're staying cool and are feeling better after a few days of really, really super hot weather. My name is Jennifer Sprague. I'm in Salem, and I'm a leader with Our Revolution Central Willamette.
Hey, Jennifer, this is Mike Goals with Our Revolution headquarters. And before we get going tonight, was going to say, let's make one membership pitch. I know you're a card-carrying member of Our Revolution, and we are, tonight is the very last call of the first half of 2021 with Our Revolution. We've done hundreds of actions and calls and events. And tonight we're asking people to sign up, if you're not already, to become a card-carrying member of Our Revolution, $5 a month or more, get a card, help build this progressive grassroots movement that's been around now for 5 years, doing some really great organizing. And a lot of our endorsed candidates are on here tonight. So I just want to make one pitch before we get going that you should become a member. So Jennifer, I'll kick it back to you real quick, and let's get the call started.
All righty, thanks, Mike. Yes, I am a card-carrying member, and I donate monthly to Our Revolution, and it's because I believe in what Our Revolution is doing. And so I hope that the folks on the call that aren't already monthly donors and members, please consider it. For as little as $5 a month, you can get a special membership card. But if you can't afford that, even a couple bucks a month can really help. Somebody's telling me to turn my camera sideways. Okay. I can't see. I'm on my phone, so I can't see what I'm looking at here.
And Jennifer, let's go ahead and kick it to Sean and get the call started.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks, Mike.
Yep. Sounds good.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sean Nickus. I'm also a volunteer with Our Revolution. I'm also a card-carrying member and monthly fee payer for Our Revolution. I'm really happy that you're all here tonight as we continue building this important movement. We've done some really tremendous things so far, from winning the school board seats, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight, but also to advocating for bills in our legislative. And from what I've heard, one of the craziest bienniums on record, also turning out to protest, to champion the causes that we all believe in so strongly. But first, I want to turn it over to Anna Marta from Our Revolution headquarters. She's our regional coordinator, and I really couldn't be more grateful to have her part of our team.
I think Sean and Anna Marta not here with us tonight, but it's me again, Mike Olis, National Field Director of Our Revolution, and it is so awesome to be with the people of Oregon. I know it's been literally hell the last couple of days, and just been in my thoughts and prayers and my actions against climate change these last few days. So Our Revolution, what are we about and what are we doing together? We have a 5-point plan that we really organize our work around. And just want to go over that tonight real quick. So our 5-point plan, we call it Organize to Win, is number one, we want to build progressive powerhouses at the state level across the country. Inside the states, we want to have progressive powerhouses, in big cities, rural communities, in Washington, D.C., all across the country, working together to build progressive power. And I think you'll hear some about that tonight. When progressives get together and organize, we can win school board races, we can win close elections, we can make transformative change at the State House and beyond. So we want to organize progressive powerhouses together. Number two, we've got to hold our politicians accountable. And I just want to say that I've seen that happen in Oregon. We got a phone call from a member of Congress today from Oregon, and he's like, "What's your problem with us?" And we're like, "We have no problem. We're organizing. No permanent enemies, no permanent friends. We just want to hold people accountable." And that's something that Our Revolution has gotten really good at. And number three, we want to elect progressive champions up and down the ballot. That includes a lot of school board members. So you're going to hear from some of those school board members tonight. Four is that we got to go out and not just elect. We got to go out and get progressive policy done. We call this, we don't just want to protest, we want to govern, right? So we want to elect folks, we want to get progressive public policy done. I know there are some disappointments at the Oregon State House this year. We want to make sure that doesn't happen next year, right? So fighting for progressive policies. And last, we got to build a progressive party. I'm here in Indiana, and I got into a little bit of a shouting match yesterday with our state party because they're ineffective, and they had a meeting, and it was terrible. And I told them what I thought. But I know even in progressive states like Oregon and California, there's a real issue with our Democratic Party not being progressive enough, being more worried about corporate donors and big money and the status quo. So as we do all this work together, we got to build a progressive party. And our members, we surveyed our members recently. What are the issues that matter most to our members? And you'll see it very clearly: voting rights. And thank you to Senator Jeff Merkley for his work on For the People Act. Healthcare, Oregon becoming very close to getting Medicare for all at the state level. 3, climate change. We saw the effects of climate change this week across the country. 4, we got to pay for this somehow. Let's tax the rich and make sure, the billionaires pay for this. Number 5, good jobs. We got to have good union jobs with strong unions. Those are our 5 top concerns and our demands at Our Revolution, as our members are surveyed. And this is just this past week, a lot of news media, a lot of attention happening, and CNN, after the filibuster killed the For the People Act in this moment, Joseph Gevarghese, our executive director, was on CNN. Progressives demand action after this failure, after the filibuster failed us, the American people. This is down in Arizona, where, weirdly enough, Portland was way hotter than in Arizona this week. This is Kristen Cinema's office. Kristen Cinema is a senator from Arizona. Her and Joe Manchin in West Virginia are blocking the filibuster. So Our Revolution is part of this table that strategizes in how we're going to move Kristen Cinema on the filibuster. So this was 2 Monday nights ago. We occupied her office. We had there was civil disobedience. This coalition, over 10 people got arrested, made national news. If you go down and see that sign, the F off filibuster, the Kristen Cinema, the center, there were a ring that's sort of styled that way, and it said, F off. And so we kind of used that aesthetic and turned it into one of our protest signs. And you still, I think, can buy that sticker at Our Revolution HQ. Now, this is going back to DC. So in DC, Our Revolution has a big operation in DC, not staff-wise, but people power-wise. And this is us last week, DC statehood. Let's make DC the 51st state. You know, almost 800,000 people do not have a voice in their federal government. And that's us Manchin for the people, right? You know, Joe Manchin in West Virginia, we're organizing there also. And this is just from yesterday. Yesterday, our revolution kicked off our fossil fuel subsidies campaign. You know, if we want to fight climate change and do it quickly, we got to kill subsidies, federal subsidies to fossil fuels. And this is Alana Omar, representative from Minnesota, talking at our event. 4 members of Congress, including Oregon Congressman Earl Blumenauer, was there speaking at a rally. And just a really positive event for a very serious issue. If you see another picture, you'll see a dinosaur, an our revolution dinosaur being powered by fossil fuel subsidies, polluting the sky. There's a couple of great pictures of it, so I'd say hop on Google and check that out. This next couple of weeks are very critical across the country for the People Act and our democracy. So there's going to be a lot of actions going on across the country. Please hop on to the internet, find an event near you. Mass actions next 2 weeks, fighting to save our democracy, and to support the For the People Act. Deadline for Democracy is that webpage, Deadline for Democracy. And then just want to review some quick wins with our elected champions. New York City had an election this past Tuesday, a week ago Tuesday, and dozens of our revolution candidates won their election for city council and citywide office. There's a little bit of a controversy right now because the New York City election office has struggled to give an accurate count in the mayor's race. And so our endorsed candidate, Maya Wiley, through ranked choice voting, is still has a shot to win this thing. So, very excited about the stuff going on in New York. And then the major news last week in New York wasn't New York City, but out of Buffalo. India Walton, an amazing, a progressive champion, a school nurse. She defeated a 4-time incumbent who with deep ties to the establishment and the Cuomo machine. India Walton took out a 4-time incumbent in the Buffalo mayor's race, Democratic primary last week, and won by 2,000 votes. And so just an awesome, inspiring story. And India was on our call Monday night, and look for big things for Buffalo. And then lastly, August 3rd is the race for Nina Turner. Nina Turner for Congress. This is a must-win race for progressives. The establishment is coming out to try and take her out. Today, James Clyburn, who, we all know James Clyburn's story. He came out and endorsed Nina's opponent yesterday. And so our revolution is in Oregon, knocking doors every day, making phone calls, being part of this effort to elect Nina Turner, Bernie Sanders' beloved co-chair, to Congress. So very exciting stuff coming up on August 3rd. Imagine Nina Turner in Congress. So that's the work we're doing. And again, if you would, please become a card-carrying member of our revolution. You'll get a sweet card, and every day you can look at your wallet and just know, man, I'm giving a couple bucks for the revolution, and we're doing all this work together, and I'm part of this movement. So thank you so much, Sean, and thank you so much, Jennifer. And I'm going to kick it back to you, Sean, and let's get the Oregon part started.
Well, sure, that'd be great. From the beginning of his campaign, Bernie stressed that it was imperative that we have progressives at every level of government, as he said, from Congress all the way to dog catcher. And one critical piece of this is actually electing progressives to school boards. And there's a couple important reasons for this. One, of course, is just building a bench of progressives because we need experienced people to run for higher office, and school boards is often where that starts. But another is having school board members who are really responsive and proactive to the needs of their communities, and who are accountable to the families they serve, and are willing to make those big commitments to education that will pay exponential dividends to all of us for years to come. And something maybe near and dear to some of the school board members' hearts would be taking over finally the school board association and getting here in Oregon and getting rid of their conservative lobbyists if we can simply get enough people elected. Tonight we have 5 passionate education advocates who serve on their local school boards, many of whom won some close elections. 3 of them are from the Salem-Keizer School District. That's Karina, Ashley, and Maria. And 2 are from down in Corvallis, Sammy and Hui. And then is Herman Green here? I don't think Herman Green is actually here tonight, but perhaps he'll be coming in later. And I would like to start out by introducing Karina for the Salem-Keizer School Board. We're going to give each of the candidates 2 minutes to introduce themselves. And from that point on, then we're going to do a roundtable discussion. And we're going to start with Karina.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Karina Guzman Ortiz, pronouns she, her, hers, and I have been recently elected to the Salem-Keizer School Board. Be starting a term here in July. So in my upbringing was mostly in the Salem-Keizer area. Nearly lifelong. I am a proud mother of immigrants, proud daughter of immigrants, and proud mother of 2 students in our district. So that for me is a big just piece of my identity, part of my identity, and why I decided to run for this seat. I've worked for a good portion of my career in education, whether that's in family services with young children, kind of in that Head Start field, public school sector as well. And for me, it really just comes down to the families, right? I think a lot about those families that I first worked with and did a lot of home visiting and just got to sit in their living rooms and hear their stories. And a lot of these families were immigrant families, and to hear their stories, to hear their struggles, and to hear their hope also for themselves and their children is what is so motivating for me, right? So to have a family be so vulnerable with you and then to be able to do something about it is encouraging, but it's also very humbling. And, I'm going into this role just considering all of those families, all of the students that I've crossed paths with, students who have reached out over the campaign, over my just career as well, considering all of those different life stories is really important for me. I was a young mother in high school, and what made it possible for me to graduate was supportive educators, free and accessible childcare. And I consider all of those things those are overall really important to our community. But how do we spread that accessibility of education and then just the support systems across our schools? So as a mother, as a mental health advocate, as a daughter of immigrants, learned English as a second language, bring all of those experiences to, this new role. And I just honestly want to listen and learn from our community. I know that things change over time and things aren't the same from when I was in our schools, right? I did attend our schools from kindergarten through graduation, but I know things have shifted and I'm just eager to get started. And, we had 4 of us get elected. So that is just so encouraging. I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but I'll leave it at that for myself. So thank you so much for the invitation again.
All right. Well, thank you, Karina. Very good. Next up, we have Ashley.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invite to be here this evening. I'm Ashley Carson Cottingham, pronouns she, her. And I was recently elected to be on the Salem-Keizer School Board, the director for Zone 3, which I'm very excited about. It was a long, drawn-out campaign that involved a recount and finally made it across the finish line. So I'm really, really grateful. I'm a working mom. I am a product of Oregon Public Schools. I grew up in the Bend Lapine School District. My grandfather was a high school agriculture and conservation teacher, and my grandma was an elementary school secretary. Both made huge contributions to kids and families in Central Oregon. All my life, I have fought for vulnerable people, from standing up for kids in court as a court-appointed special advocate for abused and neglected kids, to taking calls in the middle of the night when I was in law school from domestic violence survivors, And later, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I worked as an executive director of a national grassroots advocacy organization and for 2 different U.S. senators, including Senator Bernie Sanders as his staff director for the Subcommittee on Primary Health and Aging. We focused on fixing critical issues like senior hunger, poverty, access to health care, strengthening retirement security, and equal pay for equal work. I truly believe that public service makes a difference. I recently started a job here in Oregon as the acting deputy division director for paid family and medical leave insurance at the Oregon Employment Department. We're implementing that super exciting law here. But before that, I spent the last 7 years in state government advocating for people in nursing homes and other long-term care facilities. So I really believe in public service, really believe we have to protect our most vulnerable. We need to get our economy back working for everyone and get our kids the tools they need to succeed and keep them safe. I ran for the school board because we need new and strong leadership here in Salem and Kaiser. We've had a board that was not listening to the community and was truly a national embarrassment. And so I could not be more thrilled to be sitting alongside Karina and Maria and Osvaldo, who couldn't be here tonight, and working with the rest of the board to make sure that the democratic process is working and that we're listening to everyone in our community and we're shaping and changing policy based on what we hear and the experiences of the people in our schools. I am so grateful to our community for believing in me and supporting me, and I really can't wait to get to work. I also just want to say thank you again for the invite to be here tonight and for your endorsement in the race. It really meant a lot to me. Thank you.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we can't wait for you all to get to work either. What a way to go. All right, next up we have, and I hope I'm saying her name right, Hui White Bear.
Hello everyone, my name is Hui White Bear. I use she, her pronouns. I'm over in Corvallis School District, elected on for a 4-year term after being appointed a year and a half ago into my current term, which today's the last day of that term. So it's a good way to spend it with you all. I'm really excited to be here. I feel like I'm in really great company. Looking forward to our conversation. One thing that I will share about my experiences with K-12 is that it hasn't, personally growing up was not great as an Indigenous person. The way that our histories are taught, the experiences that I had both in California and here in Oregon, where I spent middle and high school, I felt highly marginalized. There's great support for Indigenous students through federally funded programs, but that's not in every school, including our local district here in Corvallis. I think right now, the things that are going on, hopefully folk are aware of the recent discoveries with the boarding schools in Canada and Deb Holland's call for investigation of the boarding schools here in the United States helps give a good picture of the history of education with Indigenous people. It's been used as a tool of assimilation and also has some really dark histories and that are in very recent histories, like my grandparents, parents' generations. A lot of people are still alive that survived those atrocities in the boarding schools here in North America. And so that's the experiences historically and in a contemporary sense that I've experienced public education and education in general intergenerationally, and carry those traumas with me intergenerationally. And my hope is to help heal some of those traumas as a school board member and helping work on policy where all students feel like they're represented, feel like their histories are included, feel that they have a voice. You can probably hear my kids laughing in the background, but and feel like they have a voice within the schools and that they are truly represented in a way that is positive and inclusive. And so for me, being a part of a school board is one way to help give back to the community that directly impacts youth and the future of our local community and beyond. I'm really involved with advocacy work in general. I have been in activism my entire life. Some of the other things I'm involved with have to do with climate justice and environmental activism, as well as murdered and missing Indigenous women's advocacy work. So I bring that's the lens that I bring to the school board. It's one that is grounded in who I am, the histories that are intertwined with each other, as well as a passion for creating a future that we all feel we are a part of. And so I will leave it at that and look forward to the conversation later on as well.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Next, we have Maria.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Inos Presi. My pronouns are she, her, hers, ella. And I am very, very excited to get to share this space with some very amazing people. I'm so grateful for the chance to get to represent our community at the school board level here in Salem-Keizer. I professionally work as the operations director at PECUN, Oregon's Farm Worker Union, where I've been helping support a lot of our efforts in trying to support our farm worker community, especially through all the hardships that they've been going through, especially now that we went through this heat wave and received news of the loss of one of our community members due to having to work out in this heat wave. This is definitely one of those lenses that I can bring to the school board to make sure that we're always taking care of the variety of folks that come through our doors. Previously, I have been a domestic violence advocate, so I've also seen people at some of the worst times of their lives, and I understand that our students are more than just what we see on those little snippets of time that we get them inside of our schools and sitting at their desks. And I want to make sure that we're able to support them more holistically, and especially in terms of mental health, which I find is very lacking for our communities. I'm kind of at a loss for words, honestly. I'm really excited to get to be in this space. I'm also very grateful for being reappointed to the Chariot's Board of Directors, which is just another additional space where I'll be able to support our communities in ensuring that our transit agencies are also making sure that they're providing equitable service. I'm kind of a short and sweet sort of person. So again, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Maria. For someone who's at a loss for words, you certainly had some beautiful things to say. Next up, we have Sammy.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. Hello, everybody. My name is Samia Brown, and I go by he, him, his. I'm an engineer, educator, and policymaker, and the chair of Corvallis School Board, and have been serving the school board since 2017. This picture actually was taken of me probably a little bit before I started my school board service. So if you want to see how much of a hairline loss you get during school board service, then here it is. Also, I serve as the president of the Caucus of Color, and we have seen really interesting, to say the least, interesting cycle in this election. Thankfully, myself and my colleagues who were running and won, we won with a landslide. But we witnessed in Corvallis and other places in the states, direct people running against incumbents and candidates of color, even when there is an open seat available. And if there is a message behind that, I would say it resonates with the current system in education and the discussion around equity, where sometimes like when you have an open seat during an election, there is an opportunity for people to serve and have their voices heard without taking the voices of Black, Indigenous, and board members of color. Similarly, in education, if we put more resources for those who have been unheard and underserved for so long, that does not mean that your child is going to suffer more. And that's the premise of equity. And I've been really privileged and honored to serve in the Corvallis School District, where we get it. We get equity, but also we understand that we live in an racist situation where our community, our institutions are inherently within the structure of this country, perpetuating racist issues. And unless we realize that and we say we need to examine that in ourselves, in our institutions, we can't fix the problem. And that's where I really feel very privileged and excited to serve in Corvallis and support my colleagues across Oregon through the Caucus of Color to make sure that we're investing in equity and we're being anti-racist, which means let's make sure we reverse the injustices. And as you heard, you can see education is more than just education. Public education is the bedrock of democracy. And it's going to be put into tests. It has been put into tests, and it will continue to be put into tests more than ever. Until the midterms, you will hear some discussion around the role of education and some polarization that we need to really confront it and address it clearly. What's best for the kids? And when we talk about what's best for the kids, that means what's best for our children of color, Black and Indigenous, the unique needs of our students with disabilities, serving, as Maria mentioned, serving the whole child, because you can't succeed academically if we're not addressing the social and emotional wellness and needs of our students. So our public education has been, especially during the pandemic, sources of nutrition, sources of emotional health and mental health supports. And we have now mental health clinics in our districts, in-house, to make sure we're addressing those needs. And it's not at all outside our scope, because only when we do that, graduation rates go higher. And we have a record of graduation rates, 90%. And we're on track to reach 95 or 96% graduation rates in 4 years if we continue doing what we do, not if we don't examine ourselves more and say, well, let's do better. So that's the trend that we're heading. And it's not happening by a coincidence. It's happening because we're examining critically how can we support our students to read early on. And whenever they need help for their needs as a whole child, we address that. So what's more exciting than serving on a school board and being there for the children, especially during those difficult times? They are persevering and they will be stronger than us. And I'm really excited for the future because we're building it together. Thank you. And I'm really excited to share this space with everybody.
Thank you, Sammy. Clearly, from everything you said, education is a multifaceted issue with many ways to serve and make our community better. Well, with no further ado, let's start off with the roundtable. I want to start out with a simple statement from Ashley's campaigns. Our students and teachers deserve a board that listens. Our students and teachers deserve a board that listens to the community and then makes the necessary changes to improve safety and equity. So what did you mean by that?
So I think in Salem and Kaiser Public Schools and on the board that we've had, we've seen kind of an active and aggressive effort to shut out community voices and to sort of stifle community involvement and testimony before the board. And so I think, along with my colleagues who have just been elected, we haven't even been sworn in, but soon, we want to open the doors back up, right? We want parents to come speak with us, to have the opportunity to testify before the board, to call in, to use video conference platforming, to come in person when it's safe, and to share their thoughts. We know that we won't always agree with everybody that comes to testify, but it's, I just feel like that's critical as an elected board member, that you have to hear everyone's perspective and you have to provide ample opportunity to have people's voices heard. And beyond the board meetings themselves, I would like to go further and really do concerted outreach to all different communities, marginalized individuals, and build those relationships so that there's a comfort level in working with each of us as board members and sharing perspectives, because sometimes the board meeting itself is not a particularly welcoming or friendly environment to come share concerns. And so, I would like to plan with Mike, with Maria and Karina and others to get out there, make sure that we're having spaces that are child friendly for people that don't just have ready childcare to come to a late night board meeting. Talk with a community and ask what kind of a forum would be beneficial for truly sharing your perspective about what you need from our public school system. I think we do not have great graduation rates here. I'm really excited to meet Sammy, and I'd want to hear more. What have you been doing? What can we, learn from you and others across the state who've already begun some really incredible work to right some of the wrongs, to address equity, to be an anti-racist board. We haven't had that here in Salem and Kaiser, and we all, I believe, of all four of us that have just recently been elected, want to move in that direction to be as inclusive as possible and to remove the barriers that are creating a situation where we see really poor graduation rates and disproportionate impact on our BIPOC youth. And with safety, I think safety is broad, right? Like, I want to make sure people they feel safe at school. I want them to have, mental health supports, behavioral health supports, all of the tools that they need to feel safe. Because if you don't feel safe as a person, you don't feel safe from bullying, you feel that you're, experiencing racism on a daily basis, then you're not going to be safe. You can't learn when you don't have your basic safety needs met. And so we need to listen, and then we need to examine our policies and make the necessary changes. That's our job. I can't wait to really do that work. Like I said in my opening, it's going to be hard work. It's going to take a lot of effort, but in order to break down those systems and to peel back the layers that have created an environment where there are disproportionate outcomes and people are treated inequitably, you have to do that work of peeling back the layers, breaking down the barriers, and not rebuilding something in a way that is structurally racist. So I'm looking forward to doing that work, having those conversations. And, our community is very, very, very divided. And so a lot of those conversations are going to be difficult because people are not in the same place on that journey in learning about equity. And as a white woman, I have a long, long way to go. And so I want to listen, learn, and work with everyone so that we can have better outcomes for our kids.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ashley. I'm actually kind of excited about the next question for Maria and Karina and what your experiences were going through the public school system. I see. The first question is a roundtable question for everyone. Sorry, I got called in on the last minute here for Emma, who is a little under the weather tonight. So I'm trying to do my best with these. But so I'd love to open it up to the rest of the group then, and whoever wants to answer first, just go right ahead.
I can kind of jump in. I think I had a little, I know hearing from my colleague Karina's own experiences, I think I had a little bit of a slightly different experience just because I grew up in Kansas and in New Mexico, and two vastly different worlds. And for the beginning of my life, I grew up in a very predominantly white, affluent area. And I never really understood what I now realize are microaggressions. I never understood why the other kids in my classroom didn't really want to come to my house and have dinner or spend as much time as they would with some of my the other kids in our class. It was always very interesting to be otherized, definitely in both spaces. And I felt it even substantially more in New Mexico, where we have a large Hispanic identifying population. And with that comes a lot of trauma. of what has gone through to our fellow Latinx community in Albuquerque, New Mexico, specifically, of what I'm thinking of. And I remember times when I was actually suspended from school for rebelling against what I deemed to be very unnecessary dress code standards, because as we've definitely seen is that schools tend to police students for having their natural hair, be it because they are Black students and would prefer to have them in natural hairstyles as opposed to forcing their hair to be relaxed by chemical straighteners. And I just remember feeling very dissatisfied with the responses of the folks that I was supposed to trust with my education when I was suspended for not conforming to those norms of my fellow white students as well.
It's a very informative answer. Thank you so much for that. Karina, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think everybody has their own experience depending, every school is also different and every just corner of the community is different. I grew up attending our Northeast middle schools, high school, and my experiences, listening to youth in the community today are pretty similar to what they are currently experiencing and have been experiencing, over the last several years. And one just telling story that I've shared recently is just the memory of, thinking about the school to prison pipeline and how it impacts so many of our students, and having, just what in comparison might be minimal, but I think it's those microaggressions, and sometimes microaggressions, as Maria mentioned, and the impact that they have on students, on our student body. And as a freshman, I was walking, I was skipping class, I was honestly at that time probably just needing somebody to talk to, right? I was a young, pregnant freshman, and I got pulled over by the police officer, that was kind of in our school, and I got taken back. And what I remember is these kind of mugshots being taken of me in the counselor's office. And so what that said to me was that I had my internal dilemma of what was going on in my life and having to share some things, but nobody was there to really listen. And I think that this continues to happen in our schools. And so that, for one, was just one example of being profiled. For one, I think, there is that racial profiling of what is this brown, person doing on the street, and making a lot of assumptions rather than actually listening and asking questions of youth. So that's, just one minor experience, but I do think that there's a great opportunity to increase culturally responsive education and programming in our schools, and increasing community partnerships with, different organizations or groups in our community that our youth can work with, being in the school and in the community, and linking, creating a bridge there so that they feel safe in our schools. But I know that we have a long ways to go.
Wow, that's a really inspirational story. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I'd love to hear from our Corvallis school board members too. Whichever one of you wants to go first. Go for it.
So, Sean, just to make sure you're asking this question, the next slide, which is around our experiences in the public system, right?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. There we go. Now the slide moved forward.
Wonderful.
Yeah, please go with the slide.
I have actually a unique experience. So I was born here in Tucson, Arizona, and then Phoenix, and we moved right after pre-K. So my K through 12 was in Saudi Arabia, where my father is from. And I'm from a religious minority there. And there's no way the discrimination there is comparable to racism and racist discrimination, to just put that out there. However, it was hard. It was difficult. And I never reflected on my experience in the system there until last year when I was a delegate during the Democratic Convention. We had small groups meeting up with folks, and there was a young delegate who's just out of high school. And she said her interest was in politics started in high school. And she mentioned her experience and how really having challenges with policies and having them not really fair for our students. That's where she tried to advocate for policies. And I was looking at that and remembering, wow, I was called a troublemaker back at the time. I was called out to the principal's office, and I was going to be banned from public speaking because I was against the rules that were not really fair or just. And I thought about myself as a troublemaker. I did not fit. But now I was like, wow, that was public policy. That's politics. And I feel that's really important for us to realize when we talk about student voice and public policies that listens to our students, especially those who are underrepresented and underserved and discriminated against, is so important. And that's what we call public policy. And I know we're going to talk about the politics of school boards down the road, but I just want to make it very clear. The politics of school boards is not a luxury, is a necessity for us to survive and to be able to serve our students. If we want to be staying outside politics, and that's something we have heard a lot, it means we shouldn't listen for how can we change policies that has been unjust for our students. So really, I want to say my experience in the public system was interesting to say the least. I did not have a say into changing the policies that were there. And if they don't speak to me, I have to live with it. Otherwise, I'll be called out. And I feel this is not going to be the same anymore. Our students are speaking up, and they are smarter and more courageous than when I was in high school. And I feel that challenge for us in school boards is that we expand the circle of 5 or 7 or 9 board members into every child, every youth in our schools have a voice in developing policies that speaks to them. And that's what inspires me.
Well, Samia, it's school board members like all of you who give the students room to be brave. So thank you so much. I'd love to hear from your colleague too.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I alluded a little bit earlier to my experiences with K-12 growing up were not great. And I've been to several schools, both in California and in Oregon. Well, not a ton, but like a couple in each places. And my first actually educational experiences was being homeschooled through land-based education, through my aunties and my mom, and using culturally based learning. When I went to enter the public school system, I would have been in 2nd grade according to my age, but at the time they did not think that I would be able to, I did not have the skills necessary to be in 2nd grade, so they put me in 1st grade because I had not been to public school before. So that was my entrance to public education, was that the education that I had experienced prior to public ed was not good enough, and it was less than. And so I was placed in a lower grade than I should have been. And however, I only lasted maybe 2 weeks in 1st grade before they bumped me up to 2nd grade, because I was clearly on level where I should have been, as far as like math, reading, writing, all of those skills. And so that was kind of, that was good. But it shows that there was that kind of view towards the education I had before. I would often get kicked out of class for pointing out problematic histories. I really distinctly remember, especially around Columbus Day and Thanksgiving, being literally kicked out of class and sent to the principal's office. My mom has lots of stories in elementary school for me. And this is in elementary. This was me as a child. A lot of times people think like your parents influenced you to do those things. And I'm like, no, children are very conscious. They make their own decisions. and they learn from adults, of course, but I was a very vocal student at a young age, and would challenge the dominant frameworks of the time. This was in the 80s, right? Late 80s when this was going on. And so I would always speak up against injustices I seen in our curriculum. And that was looked at as problematic, as Sammy mentioned earlier, using that terminology, I think is fitting for this. And so removed from the situation, and instead of having a engaged conversation with a student in the classroom. And so that's something I don't want to see happen in these times. And I hope does not happen. And if it does, I would hope we can find a way through our policies where that could be addressed and support the students being able to use their voices more. Up here in Oregon, this was in Southern California too, by the way, it was much more diverse down there than it was on the Oregon coast, especially when I was in middle and high school. But the kind of racism I experienced in the K-12 system in Oregon was pretty overt. People telling me things like, go back to Mexico, those kind of, and lots of other things that I won't drop the rest of them because I don't want to cause harm to other folk listening. But that was the kind of things that I would hear, as well as very anti-Indigenous comments as well. And that phrase itself is also, can be viewed as anti-Indigenous as well. And so those were the kind of circumstances I navigated, a lack of support for Indigenous students. There's policy in place that made it, it limited our ability to have culturally relevant graduation attire, if that makes sense, like being able to wear Indigenous-based like honoring like eagle feathers, which just passed this year in Oregon, where students can wear eagle feathers and regalia to high school graduations. But I didn't know at the time, but I guess I was the first student at our high school over at Taft that wore an eagle feather on their graduation cap. I just wore it because it's what we do. It was given to me as an honor for graduating high school from the community. So I did wear it out there, and that opened the door for other students as well. Luckily, the school did not enforce policy at that time, but they could have. And that's the problem with some of the policies in place is they force students from different cultural backgrounds to have to choose whether or not they're going to honor their cultures, or if they're going to, if they are going to be able to participate in graduation. So I'm really excited about that recent change at the ODE level that allows Indigenous students to wear cultural like feathers and regalia. And I hope that that helps create an avenue for other culturally relevant, honorable materials to be worn at graduations as well, because it's really important for students to celebrate who they are and to be able to do it in a way that makes sense to them without having to compromise who they are and their upbringings. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And I mentioned earlier that public education has historically not been supportive of students to stay connected to their backgrounds, and it has not been a way to learn about the complexities of our histories. It's been very, very single narrative, white-dominated histories that are taught in even ways that we learn about math. For example, like I had mentioned earlier, I was on level, but it was viewed as not because I hadn't learned math in the public ed setting. And so that's kind of a little bit about my experiences. It's been a while since I've been in K-12. My kids are in K-12 now. Still face some of the things I faced around some of the xenophobia and misogyny and the over-sexualization of brown girls, which is something I also experienced as well. But I know that we've changed a lot over the years, we as in society, and I hope we continue to change and help students feel more welcomed.
Well, thank you all for those really great personal stories. I'm a little bit overwhelmed. Thank you so much. I believe all of you ran against Republicans who have very different agendas for our schools. What would have it meant for your district had the Republicans won?
I'll jump in and be brief.
Why was it important to you that to beat back these Republican candidates?
I think kind of referencing some of the earlier points by Ashley, who, is also elected on the same board, is the silencing of community, of our youth, of our educators has been just harmful. And seeing that seemed like it was the norm to be expected, right? Had our opponents won the election, and it has become a very, polarized and politicized role, and these school board seats have been. And although everybody claims to be doing it for the children, I think that sometimes other things get in the way, right? So for us, I just, having spoken to all, Ashley, Maria, Osvaldo, who are also on these seats, I know I can say for us, we bring our full selves, our stories, and really consider our community. And I feel that genuineness from every single one of us. And what would it have been had our, opponents taken on the seats? It's hard to know exactly, but I can say that I feel hopeful and excited with the current results. And had it been different, I think our community would have kept fighting. But the truth is that it's a lot of work, and our community has been, asking for support, asking for resources, asking to be heard, and they haven't been. And so I hope that with this win, we can, everybody can kind of catch their breath, and we're going to keep pushing, and we expect to be held accountable, absolutely. But the difference is that we can work in collaboration, and I definitely look forward to that. Look forward to doing that. So it was a rough one.
Well, Lou, if you want to chime in on that, first of all, I'll put to that disclosure that there is no partisanship per se on paper in the school board elections in Oregon. They're nonpartisan. However, it's very clear when someone comes in with a specific agenda, you can see the leanings of it. And Lou and I are grateful to receive the endorsements of our revolution in Corvallis, and also the Democrats. But I'll share with you what we heard. What we heard from opponents is quotes, academic excellence is all what matters, end quotes. And I feel it's very problematic statements when it is used to confront and counter our investments in equity. Of course, academic excellence is a great objective, but that's not all what it is. And I feel the narrow-mindedness of thinking that mental health, investments in mental health, and investments in the social and emotional well-being of our students, social studies, diverse educational experiences where students learn about other cultures and other lived experiences, those matter a lot. It's not for the sake of academic excellence in terms of standardized tests. It's in terms of making a good citizen, successful graduate, someone who can graduate from high school and be a functioning citizen with their peers. And I feel that's the challenge. There was a message of going backward to where public education was, 60s, 70s, 80s, where people thought that you need to read, write, and calculate, and that's good. You're good to go. Move on. I feel that's no more applicable. It wasn't ever applicable, but now we're realizing how public education fails students if we only focus on reading, writing, and math, and we don't talk about the underlying issues to help students succeed in reading, writing, math, and also in other things as well. I don't know if that captures it, Lou, for Corvallis.
Yeah, and I would say it may not necessarily be candidates' political affiliations. It was more about ensuring that we're able to do the equity work and the anti-racist work that needs to happen in our district, and hopefully that work is happening in other districts as well. I would say that what Sammy is talking about is I agree with all the stuff that he's said, and also that you have to be able to do that work. We made a commitment last year, and that's something I was really adamant in my campaign, was that the district made a commitment to be an anti-racist district. That's not something that is just words. That's a commitment and that's based in action. And we need people that understand what that means and how to do anti-racist work. How do you interrupt racism in all its forms, whether it's during our board meetings or through policy or through somebody's appeal? Like, how do we hear, how are we addressing anti-racism and doing equity work as well? One of the things I think with equity that, in listening to community, that came up a lot in our campaign too, is like, we need to hear the community. And sometimes that's like thinking about whose voice is being centered. And that's how I think about hearing the community. We hear everybody's voices, but what are the needs? Who is being left out consistently? And how do we center the needs of those most vulnerable or those the most harmed through our policies and through historically through K-12. And so I think that is what was the most important pieces of making sure that we won, if that makes sense. So I think it was more around those values of ensuring we can do the work that we said we're here to do as a district and keep that moving forward.
Okay, we've kind of moved around there. The next question, does anyone else want to answer the question?
Hey, Sean, I just wanted to hop in here real quick. Let's, for sake of time, there's two good questions in the Q&A. Can we just have kind of conclude tonight's conversation with our Q&A questions? And then
please go ahead. I can't see the Q&A from where I am, so please go ahead.
Would somebody be able to read the Q&A?
Oh, yeah, here we go.
I just dropped them in the chat, if that's helpful. Can you see the chat, Sean?
Oh, yes. So many, if not all of you, were targets of right-wing scare tactics about critical race theory during your campaigns. Critical race theory has become a central talking point of the GOP and is clearly intended to be a strategy for the 2022 elections. Do you have advice for future candidates of how to respond to this fear-mongering?
I don't know.
Oh, go ahead.
I just talked.
I don't know that I have any good advice. I can just speak to, it was definitely difficult. It became something that we heard constantly in our phone calls and our outreach. And I think our approach was to try to attempt to keep people on the phone and ask, like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, what do you, a lot of times that made them more angry. I heard a lot of, if you don't know what it is, you're not qualified to be on the school board. But, I would try to make statements like, if you're asking me if I think that racism is real, yes. Are you asking me if I think we should teach about, the true history of our country? The answer is yes. So trying to unpack it without getting into like a super academic sort of frame, because usually that's not where they're coming from. It's mostly just a repeated, I think, basically just a Fox News repeated talking point. And so trying to ask them, what are they afraid of? What are they worried that, or what have you seen something being taught that you're concerned about, and tell me more about that, to at least try to keep the dialogue going. And then there was just a lot of times where, sometimes those folks don't believe that we should teach the true history, and they don't believe that racism exists. So you're not going to make much headway with them, and just move on to the voters you want to vote and who care about the things that you align with your values.
I would give advice on along the lines of what Ashley said, is not getting into that really in-depth. We're going to go over an academic article together about critical race theory. A lot of people actually don't know what that means. And so finding a way to break it down in a couple really specific points of what it is, and remind everyone that the more we learn about each other's shared histories, the more we'll understand each other. And so that's a big part of it, right? Like, we have to understand how we've experienced these same overlapping histories, and we've experienced them differently depending on what our backgrounds may be, whether it's our race and our socioeconomics, or overlap of the two, our gender and sexuality. There's so many overlaps that impact how we've experienced history, and our ancestors have experienced history in this country as well. And so being able to understand those histories together helps us understand each other better. And so I don't understand why people don't want to understand each other better, because I think that helps us move forward together better. And so that's the kind of framework that I think is helpful in discussing critical race theory. Is like, it's a big term that scares a lot of people, but the basis of it is like understanding those intersections of basically about the legal system impacting people's racialized experiences. But it's helping us understand each other really in our experiences.
I would add briefly, I'll change a little bit from the quotes of Michelle Obama. I say, when they go negative, go positive. And I'll provide an example of inclusive bathrooms. The conversation now is getting much better, and partly because there was this discussion around, let's think about it. It's safe, it's inclusive. And by the way, if you go a few feet away from here, I have a bathroom in my house and there's no sign on it. It's just like your home. And when you disarm people's fear and disarm them from the talking points that they heard in some news media that's fear-mongering, basically, it gets them to really think more critically or much better. And the same way about critical race theory, the way I would confront a talking point that I heard, for example, there's a myth that says schools are pushing white students to feel that they were born guilty and they're inherently bad. And the answer is no. And we make them feel accountable, responsible to reverse the injustices. They're not bystanders. They are actively compassionate, actively helping their peers and reversing injustices. And when we go through these conversations one at a time and way before elections, I feel we will be having an opportunity to make sure education is about the students and serving the students. It's not about using fear tactics to divide the community. And of course, BIPOC students will be the victims of these attacks.
All right. Well, would anyone else like to weigh in on this question? Otherwise, we'll move to our last question of the evening. Hearing none. This question also comes from the chat. I would love to know how our progressive school directors here are going to get to the bottom of how much money and teacher staff time is spent on standardized testing, including at the ODE and the school board levels. And I'll take whoever wants to speak first.
I mean, I think that's a really great question, because one of the things that I always said during my whole campaign was the Einstein quote, and I'll butcher it a little bit, but it's essentially about how if you expect a fish to climb a tree, it'll grow up its whole life thinking that it's stupid. And I definitely think that having standardized tests is not the way to be able to accurately assess where our students are at. There's a whole variety of ways that we could actually assess their intelligence levels and how well they're actually capturing the information, which I think is more important than just creating a system where students just memorize the responses, the equations, the formulas, and then just forget about it by the next time around. Just hold on to it long enough to be able to pass that test with a good enough score to provide the appropriate amount of funding for our schools, and it's just not a fair, equitable way to do it. It's definitely something that I would love for us to be able to tackle, and it's going to take, I think, a bit of work, just because when you get down to something so specific and kind of nitty gritty, I think it takes a little bit of time to be able to really be able to pinpoint how those funds are being utilized and where they're being spent. But it is really important to start with how much time our teachers are losing on being able to educate our students by having to proctor these tests. And I think that's a good place to start. And then we could see if we can't start allocating that time to educating our students in different ways.
Thank you for that very complete answer. Anyone else want to weigh in? Love to hear from y'all.
I'll go unless someone else wants to go. So I'll share my agreements with Maria. Exactly, standardized testing for the sake of standardized testing, or even for the sake of understanding where our students are at, are not efficient, are of the past. And probably for a nationwide organization, this is a good opportunity to see the picture of how things are connected. The federal government, through the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, control the mandates of doing those tests. And if a Department of Education on a state level asks for a waiver or exemptions or changes, that's under the control of the federal government. And by effect, the state controls what school districts can and cannot do. This year, the school districts across Oregon, including Corvallis and my understanding Salem as well, school boards voted to actually not to do the standardized testing. And it was really a situation where we had 6 weeks. We can invest them on social and emotional and connection and processing. How much did you learn through this pandemic? What kind of stories that you went through, and how can you use those to grow? And how can we process any trauma students went through? All of these are so paramount where they take over on a standardized test, especially the standardized testing that was offered this year that will not be able to will not be possible to use to compare with past years, future years, and will be unfair because our students are not ready to take those really intense tests. And by the way, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We do have assessments that are provided in school districts and in the classroom where students know where they're at and how they can progress, but in a way that's mindful for them. And to Maria's analogy or example, the fish can swim, and every students have unique abilities, and there are opportunities that fits their abilities where they're at and at the time they're at. And standardized testing don't accommodate for that. So I'm really excited about the future, but as a statewide and even nationwide conversation, we need to really think critically about how funding mandates are tied to standardized testing and how can we provide more flexibility and innovation to assess where our students at. For the question itself, how much money are there? You can go for testing and assessment line item into any of the budgets, and you can see that. However, unfortunately, it might be hard to distinguish SBAC from other tests that districts perform. That being said, I want to be very honest with you. It takes lots of time, lots of emotional labor, and lots of money to do these tests.
I'll add into that it's important to understand what the purpose of the testing is and how that data is going to be used. I know I sound very committed to anti-racism because I am in equity work, but I also really like working with data and understanding the stories those tell and who's left out of those data sets. A lot of times, depending on what school district it is, you're not even going to get the information that people would hope for in those standardized tests, especially for students of color from very specific racial demographics in the way that data racialization happens. And so I would encourage people to learn more about that and how that impacts access to access to funding for specific communities as well. So example is a lot of schools will end up having an asterisk school districts for certain groups of students of color. So there's no way to like really tell how students of color are impact or how they're experiencing the standardized tests themselves in the data sets that are reported out on ODE. So it's really important conversation. I could talk for at length about this and my thoughts on it, but to keep it simple, we need to do a lot of work on standardized testing because it's already, there's plenty of research out there that shows that it's not really as beneficial as we think it is. And it impacts students differently depending on their socioeconomics and their racialized backgrounds as well.
Well, thank you all for those complete answers. And would anyone else like to weigh in? I believe that's our last question for the night. Otherwise, I'm going to bring it back over to Mike and just say that I'm really happy to be a card-carrying member of our revolution. And I certainly would love to have all of you join me and Jennifer Sprague in being card-carrying members. And Mike, I'll let you take it over.
Great. A little bit of slide deck problems there. Somehow my screen just went completely white. But it's awesome to be with everybody tonight and just love hearing the stories out of Oregon. I know it's been a terrible week in Oregon and across the country with climate change. But this is what we do. We go out and organize together and do our best and fight. And sometimes we get big victories and we get to celebrate a little bit and talk about the fight ahead and the work ahead. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. This is again, our last call of the first half of 2021. I'm here in the Eastern time zone, so we got about 50 minutes left in the day. And so it's awesome to share this with you tonight. And the next half of the year is gonna be very busy. So please be in touch. Let's keep on organizing together. And we end our calls with a chant. When we organize, we win. That's our motto. And if everybody would, if you're into it, let's just shout out, when we organize, we win, and then we'll call it a night. So when we organize,
we win.
We win.
When we organize,
we win.
Great, everybody. We'll talk to everybody.